Well, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we are at a very difficult period right now. The intelligence agencies seem to have declared open war on the Trump team. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and let's talk about let's update on what's happening. And to me, this is no small incident. The interesting thing about it is, I get up this morning, and as usual, I wasn't even up. I wake up and I grab my iPad and I start, weeding through the news. What can I see? Are there any tidbits of information that may be of value? Of course, And I look, and normally, I'm going to be a little later doing the show, but I look and I see something very interesting and fairly horrifying. Let's take a look at what we got here. And now you can go anywhere you want and get it. In fact, let's do this. Before we get into that, let's look at the source. Let's go, but it's behind a paywall. But let's just look at the source and we'll see that it's behind a paywall, but we can find it elsewhere. We'll share the screen. Let's go right to Bloomberg and see what happened. So we got Bloomberg here. Witkoff advised Russia on how to pitch Ukraine plan, right? Now they won't let you go any further. You can't find it. You go any further. So what we're going to do is, oh, that's interesting. Witkoff advised Russia on how to pitch Ukraine plan to Trump. Gee, I wonder how they might have found that out. Let's see if we can figure it out by going to another article. There's millions of articles. See, Bloomberg was the lead. They put it behind a paywall, but everywhere else, Medusa, and you can go everywhere and find it. All you gotta do is search. Leaked recordings show Witkoff coached Kremlin advisors on how to approach Trump over Ukraine. Bloomberg. U.S. presidential envoy Steve Witkoff. Now, I'm going to stop when we get to the important part. U.S. presidential envoy Steve Witkoff suggested to Russia presidential aide Yuri Yushakov in October. So this means this was a while back. This wasn't yesterday. This wasn't today. In October, that Washington and Moscow worked together on a peace agreement to end the war in Ukraine, according to Bloomberg. Here's the important part. According to Bloomberg, well, how would Bloomberg know? According to Bloomberg. Let's look at this. How in the heck would Bloomberg know something like that? I think we're about to figure out this. We're about to figure this out, this mystery. On November 25th, the outlet published a detailed report based on a transcript of a phone call between Witkoff and Ushakov held on October 14th and later released the full transcript. The outlet did not say how it obtained the recording. I don't care what else is in it. Now they go on during the conversation, which lasted over 5 minutes. Witkoff laid out suggestions for Ushakov, blah, 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 blah. He said he told Trump, blah, blah, blah. But let's get back to this. Bloomberg published a detailed report based on a transcript of a phone. So Bloomberg had it. Now I'm hearing some things. I'm not sure that there may be a recording released, right? But we do know that Bloomberg had the full transcript. The outlet did not say how it obtained the recording. Well, let's start here. That I think is fairly obvious. Just the basics. And I'm a former investigator, but you don't have to be one to figure this out. If Witkoff talked to Ushakov, two envoys of government leaders, then it was on a secure line, wasn't it? Obviously, clearly, there's no way that he just picked up his Verizon phone. Hey, let me see. I'll see if this phone call gets through. Hello, operator. Can I get the Kremlin? Yeah. Yuri Ushakov, please. Okay, hold on. Wait a minute. I'll see if he's available. That's not the way this works. They didn't call on an open line. This was a secure line. Okay. Now there are two issues: what they talked about, whether it'll work, whether Witkoff, all that. I'm not even addressing anything at this point about the call, about Witkoff, about anything. Forget all of that. Let's talk about the issue of the phone call being tapped. That's the issue at hand here, right? I know people are going to say, but they're going to start commenting on what may have been said, what may not have been said. People are going to talk about whether or not this whole thing will work or whether it won't. Those things are all irrelevant. What's relevant here is that an envoy on behalf of the President of the United States, on behalf of the government of the United States, spoke on a clearly and obviously a secure line to an envoy of a nuclear superpower at which the government of the United States is at odds and we are in a dangerous position. Clearly, it was the intelligence agencies. I mean, it's like, you have to compare it to Nord Stream. When a crime happens, you have to ask yourself who had the motive to commit the crime, who has the ability to commit the crime. You know what I mean? Who has the opportunity. You got to have three things to commit a crime: motive, ability, and the opportunity, right? Who had the motive to commit this crime? Because clearly this is a crime. Clearly what happened here was someone tapped Witkoff's phone. Now, which means that all of the Trump team's phones are tapped all of the time, which doesn't surprise me. But we could know that. They're all tapped all of the time. Tapping it wrong, shouldn't have done it bad. However, releasing this now means that here's the question: what was the intent? Why would you release it? Right? Why would you release it? So what we have now is someone who would have the ability to do it, who would have the motive to do it. Well, we know the neocons or anyone who would be in opposition to the current the motive would be anyone who would be in opposition to the current negotiations, notwithstanding whether these negotiations are, going to work or not going to work. Who would have the motive to commit this crime? Clearly a crime, right? The tapping of the phones, right? Because you would, in order to tap these phones, in order to tap Witkoff's phone, you would have to go to court and you would have to have a judge say that you can do it. Well, let's face it, we know that didn't happen. In order to if you release this information, clearly releasing them has the intent of influencing U.S. foreign policy, which we know. I forgot the name of the act, but you can't do that. That's illegal. It's just like, no one can be involved in formulating or influencing or changing U.S. foreign policy. That's the U.S. government. The president is supposed to do that. He's supposed to be in charge. So if you do not have permission and or direction from the U.S. From the president of the United States, you can't do that. You can't do something that would influence or negotiate the U.S. foreign policy. So clearly we have a crime here. Who has the motive to do it? The people who are opposed to this, which means who knows who. We know MI6, we know the Europeans, we know that there are factions within the ruling elite, there are factions within Washington, D.C., both Democrat and Republican. There are various factions, but whoever did it it's clearly illegal. This is not even disputable that this is a crime. Not even disputable that this is a crime. There's no way someone could go to a court and get in fact, they wouldn't even go, because if they went to a court, guess what? This is under Tulsi Gabbard. They'd have to hide it from her, which would then be on and on and on. This whole thing reeks of criminality. So they have illegally tapped Witkoff's phone. They have illegally released information from that illegal wiretap in an attempt to influence U.S. foreign policy, which again is a criminal violation. Now, next, it's gone to Bloomberg. Now, there are First Amendment protections for um, uh, the press to an extent, right? There are First Amendment protections to an extent, such as you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? There's certain things, and there's things that you could say to people that the Supreme Court has deemed a fighting word. So you can't just claim the First Amendment protections to infinity. I can do and say anything I want, no matter what. No, you can't run into onto an airplane and start yelling, "There's a bomb on here," when you know there's no bomb on there. Now, if you truly believe there was a bomb and you could just show that in court, I truly believed it, and I had reason to believe there was a bomb, and the court says, "Yeah, I guess you had reason to believe that there's a bomb." Or you yelled on and you went in, you had reason to believe there might be a bomb, and you yelled, "There might be a bomb. You have to get out of here." If you truly believe that and you could justify it in court, you wouldn't be protected. But just to run in there and scream, "There's a bomb in here," and then just say, "Well, I'm protected by the First Amendment." Sorry, the First Amendment does have some limits. And one of the limits in freedom of the press is going to be, is clearly to deliberately help violate statutory law, to deliberately help intelligence agencies or other people expose things that are illegal, that were gotten illegally, and that are being used to influence foreign policy illegally. So I think that not only has there been criminal activity by the intelligence agencies, in my opinion, there's criminal activity going on by Bloomberg, I think. So, and in the same way, if you'll remember, during WikiLeaks, there were people arguing that Julian Assange leaked classified information. He leaked things that could damage the U.S. government. Well, under the arguments made against Julian Assange, clearly we have espionage charges here. We have espionage violations here. And I think they weren't valid against, number one, they weren't valid against Julian Assange because he wasn't even an American citizen. But I think we have pretty damn clear violations of espionage laws and other laws here. But what we're looking at is, and well, let me do this. Let's look here. Watch this. Is this an operation? Watch this. Watch this. I just did a search. I did a search, right? Want to see, if you want to see it's an operation, watch this. Here's a search. Trump defends Witkoff after leak appears to show envoy coaching Russians. Trump bat Witkoff after leak. Kremlin says leaked Witkoff. Leaked call. Witkoff leaks throw entire peace talks in doubt. Now, here's the key. Look at this. That's the game right there. Look at this. Witkoff leaks throw entire peace talks in doubt. Right? Trump defends Steve Witkoff after transcripts of call with Russians leaked. Putin aid on leak with Trump. Leak coach Russian officials. He coached Russian officials on Ukraine deal. Leaked everything. Look at this. Analysis. What leaked details of Trump invoice talks with Russia might mean for Ukraine, right? I've been part of high-level negotiations. Witkoff broke the one rule that matters. Trump defends envoy Witkoff. So what do you got there? You have every single outlet grabbing this thing saying, "Oh, the calls were leaked," and this is none of them. Now, I'm just Joe, I'm just Schmucky the Clown here. I'm not a high-powered international lawyer. I'm not I don't know, investigative journalist for the Washington Post, the Telegraph, the BBC, etc. And I look at that, and I immediately, when I say, okay, what happened here? Someone tapped clearly a classified high-level phone call on a secure line and leaked it to the press. Who has the ability to do that? Only the intelligence agencies have the ability to do that. Now, that was no doubt a combination. Somebody put Five Eyes exactly. That was CIA. That was MI6, maybe Mossad. That was likelihood, we maybe French intelligence, whatever, it doesn't matter. It was clearly the intelligence agencies who were behind this whole thing, who are in fear, who are in horror. Now, the fact of the matter is this. I think also of consequence is the fact that this phone call is from a month ago. This phone call is from October, which means that they have been recording and tapping everything they can get their hands on to try to put the fritz on this thing. In fact, I would argue this. They have been, no doubt, watching this from the very beginning, keeping an eye on everything, putting together their plan. And apparently they don't have much because this is pretty weak. That's all you got? Hey, if you read it, what you see is this. Let's see. Why don't we go to the Telegraph and look at this. No, they want to put that behind. Let's look and see somewhere. CNN. Nope, that's just video. We want to see what they're up to here. If Donald Trump is to be believed, this is what the Telegraph. The leaked phone call between his envoy Steve Witkoff and a senior Kremlin official was nothing but a very standard form of negotiations. The simple fact that Witkoff spoke to Yushakov was entirely standard, but the content of their conversation was anything but. So what they tell us is, we got the content, and that's a big deal. One thing they must never do, this is what they said, because here's what they're saying, that Witkoff told the Russians how to pitch this to Trump. This is how you want to say this to Trump. This is how you want to pitch it, right? The one thing they must never do is coach their opposite number on how to manipulate their own boss, particularly when they are dealing with a hostile state. Oh, no, that is against the unwritten rules, not just of diplomacy, but common sense. The moment you start helping your interlocutors to get your chief to agree to their ideas is the moment when you succumb to being manipulated. Anyone who has read the leaked transcript of the call cannot avoid concluding that, let's hear this, here's the conclusion, that in Witkoff, the Russians have found their useful idiot. He is ready, willing, and eager to help their designs. Yuri, here's what I would do. My recommendation, says Witkoff in the transcript disclosed by Bloomberg. Yes, please, replies Ushakov. Witkoff helpfully describes that Putin should call Trump about the ceasefire. What a terrible agreement that had just been reached in Gaza, and, quote, reiterate that you congratulate the president on this achievement, that you supported it, that you respect that he is a man of peace, and you're just. You're really glad to have seen it happen. So I would say that. If Putin follows that advice, then Witkoff adds, I think that it's going to be a really good call. Oh, my God, what a terrible thing. Now, here's the issue there. Here's the issue. Let's just say, for the sake of discussion, as an intellectual exercise, we look at that and say, all right, Witkoff talked to the Russians and said, if you want to get Trump on board, here's what you need to do. Now, as a person who has been involved in negotiations, as a person who has been involved in business, in sales, in things like that, as an example, when I was in sales, let me give you an example. I can recall like a major sale. This was a business that was going to do cameras and all kind of security things. That's what I was in sales, all kind of electronic security network things like that, right? And this particular business had a number of sites. And these sites wanted cameras and all kinds of things that they could have one collective area and all of their sites. I can look at all of my cameras. I can look at who went and came in the doors and what security numbers, what cards were used to swipe, how I can take somebody's name off if I fire them. If I fire somebody at this location, I can immediately go into the computer and kill their entrance card so they can't get in. I can look and I can see anyone who has a card, when they went in, what door, all this kind of stuff. I'm selling all that, right? I'm talking to the owner of the business and I'm saying, do it. And he says, well, the price is a little high. I want to knock X amount off, right? Okay. Yeah, you need to knock $10,000 off the price, whatever. And he says, I got to talk to your manager. And I'm like, I can't do that. I can't do that. But you're going to talk to my manager. Yeah. And I advised him because I wanted the deal to happen because I was getting paid handsomely off that deal back then. Right. I was making a pretty good chunk off that. Can you imagine? I'm making a good chunk off of that deal. That was my biggest deal for the year. And what did I do? I said, well, I can't say yes. You got to get it by my manager. What did I say to the owner of this business? I said, look, if I were you, I would say to my manager, to the manager, Dave at the time. So I'm like, look, I can put you on the phone with Dave and you got to convince him to knock $10,000 off the installation price. If I were you, I'd say to Dave, if you do this, this, and this, I'll sweeten the deal with this, this, and this. You'll get the $10,000 off. That's my opinion. I can't say for sure that Dave will do that. So what was I doing? I was doing exactly what Witkoff was doing. I wanted the deal to go through. And he's talking to my boss. And I said, hey, you want to get the deal? This is how you should talk to my boss. Here's the thing. Didn't my boss have agency? Didn't my boss have agency? And here's the thing. If my boss found out that I said that, which I could care less, I'd go back to my boss and say, hey, I told him to say this. And hopefully you get to do. What did I care to hide? If my boss passed the deal, he passed the deal. It was ultimately up to him, right? Here's my point. If Witkoff said to Ushakov, hey, you say this to Trump and it'll work, right? Now what happens? Trump finds out. It's been leaked. It's what they used to call during Russiagate a hack and leak. It's a hack and leak. The Russians hacked something and leaked something. We kept finding out that the Russians never hacked it, much less leaked it. But here's the only thing that matters, ultimately. When the person who allegedly was being manipulated, Trump finds out. Now it gets to Trump. Witkoff says to the Russian guy, look, if you want Trump to go on board, if I was you, I'd say this. That'll help. You'll get the deal. Okay. The leak goes back to Trump and Trump finds out. Okay. Witkoff said to this guy, talk to me and say this, and you might have a better chance of getting the deal, right? Then it ended up to Trump at that point. Trump's the guy that's allegedly being manipulated. Isn't it up to Trump to look at that and say, that's out of line, Witkoff, I wouldn't do that? Or for Trump to look at it and say, I'm okay with that. If Trump's okay with it, right, then what's the crime here? First of all, there is no crime. I haven't seen anywhere. I can't come up with a statute anywhere where it says Witkoff can't do that. Number one. Number two, Witkoff was authorized by Trump to negotiate on Trump's behalf. So we know that he was negotiating legally on Trump's behalf. How he negotiated, well, we can speculate. We could pick everything that Witkoff said. We could pick it all apart and say he should have said this. He shouldn't have said that. He offered too much. He offered too little. He talked too long. He didn't talk long enough. It doesn't matter. We could pick everything that Witkoff said apart and say he should or shouldn't have done that. Sure, that's speculation. It doesn't matter. It's not a crime. In fact, I'll go further. If you look at all of the things that are said in I've read article after article, and I haven't seen one person say, well, we're alleging that what Witkoff did was illegal. No, it was perfectly legal. He was authorized to negotiate on behalf of the commander-in-chief, which means he was negotiating on behalf of the commander-in-chief, number one. Number two, he's a real estate guy. He negotiates in New York. And let's be honest, Trump isn't a real estate guy. Trump negotiates in New York. They know the game. In fact, let me go one further. I know the game. You know why? You know what my manager used to say to me? Garland, if you can't get a deal, put me on the phone and I'll get the deal for you, right? And it would be sometimes like this. I got to run out to the call. Or let me go talk to my manager, see if I can get the deal, right? And I already knew that I could or couldn't get the deal. And I called my manager. Yeah, what are you doing? I'm killing a few minutes. I told them that I had to talk to you. Okay, we already know what I'm playing a game. Then I talked. Well, how's things going? How's the family? Great. I hang up. I go back to the people that I'm negotiating with. Well, I talked to the manager. He said he'll okay it. See what I mean? Or there's so many games you play, right? I'm talking to a prospect. Well, we do this, that, and that. And there's, let's say, two business partners, and they're looking at each other. And I think to myself, well, these are business partners. They want to make a deal, but they need to talk a couple minutes. So they're looking at each other. I'm saying, well, here's the numbers. And they kind of look at each other. And I know they need to talk. I'll go, hey, guys, look, you do me a favor. I need to run out to the car for about 10 minutes. Just got a text from another person. I need to touch base. My manager has a couple questions. I need about 20 minutes. Can I run out to the call and I'll run out? I'll make about 20 minutes. Look, you guys take a few minutes to chat, whatever you want to, and I'll be back. I have a call to make. I go out to the car. I'd sit there. I'd play, some video game on my phone. I'd call a friend. I'd surf the net. Half hour. I'd come back in. What was I doing? I wanted to give those guys a chance to mull. I could see they needed a chance to talk. I come back in. Okay, guys. Garland, you know what? We've talked. You got the deal. See what I mean? When it comes to negotiation, understand something. He's a rich guy, and he does negotiations in New York City. I was a salesperson. I was a very good salesperson. I understand that there's a lot of games you play, and so does Trump, and so does this is what they do. Trump may have his weaknesses. Wickoff may have his weaknesses, but we can't deny that those guys did business in New York City. They made deals, they lost deals, they screwed up deals, they went bankrupt, they got money again. They did all of these things. In the course of doing these things, there are a lot of games you play in negotiation. In fact, Trump could have been on the phone. Hey, look, Steve, yeah, do what you need to do, get the deal. Right? That's what, if you send somebody, you tell them, dude, yeah, here's what I want. Go talk to the Russians. What do you want me to do? I need you to get the deal. Wickoff knows all the games he needs to play to get the deal. Oh, yeah, Trump do this. Here, just tell Trump this. Don't tell Trump. He already knows when he goes there what Trump will probably take and what Trump won't. He already knows. He's been given his parameters. I go in to talk to somebody. I'm given my parameters. Garland, we can knock up to 15% off. The monthly payment for this, we can give them the first 3 months free. We can do this, we can do that. But don't just come out and give them that. When you start negotiating, give them 1 month free. If they won't take the deal, go to 2. And if you get your last resort, go to 3. That's your maximum you can go to. And start with 5% off. You can get, see what I mean? We're talking about negotiating. That's all we're talking about. And that's Wickoff's job, and that's what Wickoff does. So from my perspective, whether I like him or don't like him, I got issues with Wickoff and Trump and everybody else. I got issues with the people in the chat. It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is this. Wickoff was authorized to negotiate on Trump's behalf. Excuse me, not forget Trump. He was authorized to negotiate on behalf of the commander-in-chief. And it's up to the commander-in-chief to determine whether or not his methods of negotiating were appropriate or inappropriate. Nobody else, except maybe the courts if someone could allege illegality, right? But I have seen no allegations of illegality, no allegations. In fact, there really couldn't be any because they didn't do anything. He just said, if I were you, I'd say this. At that point, it's back to Trump. Trump, what do you think? He told the Russians that if I were you, I'd say this to Trump. And if Trump says, I just want the deal, man, I don't have a problem with that. I don't care. I told him, go get the deal. Play the games you have to. Yeah, we know how the game is played here. Shuffle the cards, move the deck around a little bit, get the deal, right? Apparently that's what happened. But somebody was listening, which is bad enough. And then somebody was leaking. Let's look. First of all, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's look at some other things. Let's go backwards for a second. Russiagate, right? Let's go to the New York Times. Let's go to March 4th, 2017. President Trump on Saturday accused former President Barack Obama of tapping his phones at Trump Tower the month before the election, leveling the explosive allegation without offering any evidence. No evidence whatsoever. What an unthinkable allegation by Trump. Clearly, this is unacceptable. Oh, wait a minute. FBI apologizes to court for mishandling the surveillance of Trump campaign. Mishandling the surveillance. Mishandling it? They apologizes to the court. Why? So let me ask you this. If I lied to the court, do I get to just apologize? Hey, court, I lied in court. Okay, Mr. Nixon, that's a violation of law. That's a felonious act. What do you have to say for yourself? I apologize. Can we move on? I mishandled the truth, right? And if you go down, the FBI apologized to the secret court that handles national security for the way it conducted the surveillance. The way it did? The way it did? In other words, for the way it broke the law, what did they do? They tapped Trump's team's phones. They lied and said they didn't. Everywhere in the media, it said the same article with no evidence. Trump makes accusation without evidence. Trump has offered no evidence. He makes accusation. So when they tap Trump's phone, then let's go one further so we can establish a pattern of misbehavior and criminality. Does anybody remember the impeachment over Ukraine? What happened? Donald Trump made a phone call to Ukraine, and he talked to Zelensky and said, hey, there was think about this. Let's think about this for 1 second. What did he allege? He alleged that there was corruption in Kiev, right? Trump said, look, hey, the Biden people are up to no good. There's corruption going on, and I think there should be an investigation. Perhaps in hindsight, he was onto something, huh? And they impeached him. Why? Because they were listening to the phone call. And then they said he tried to use his position as president to manipulate the Zelensky and the Ukrainians into investigating corruption in Kiev. And clearly there was no corruption in Kiev. I mean, how absurd was that? And therefore, he must be impeached. So what happened? When Donald Trump was running for president, they tapped his phones and they tapped the phones of the people who were around him. And when he said, hey, my phones are tapped, they said he said that without evidence everywhere in the news. Then what happens? He calls old Zelensky and says, hey, Zelensky, I think there's corruption going on in Kiev. They listened to the phone and they went after him and they impeached him for accusations that there was corruption in Kiev that needed to be investigated. Now, the last time I checked the news in the last week, there were investigations of corruption in Kiev and unthinkable amounts of money, 100 million to start. There's allegations everywhere of all these money. There's a Turkish newspaper now who has released information about the accounts of money, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars or something that were put in accounts out of Kiev. So the bottom line is same thing. Intelligence agents tapped his phone and everybody around him when he was running for president. They used a phone call to impeach him when he alleged that there was corruption in Kiev. What an unthinkable and absurd allegation. And now what happens? And now we find out that they've been tapping his phone. October. The Trump team is negotiating about a war. They're negotiating, which they have. I don't, look, I'm a lefty. Okay. I'm not a big Trump fan by any stretch of the imagination. I'm an anti-war person. I don't care who's in charge right now. I don't care who's the president. Certainly as a guy who's a left-leaning person, as a guy who's opposed to war and empire and all that stuff, there's stuff Trump said that could make me pull my hair out. So I don't care who's in power. I don't want to get involved in a nuclear war with Russia. And I don't want to see people continue to die in war in this dangerous situation, World War III type situation. So I want the Trump team to be able to operate in an effective and an efficient manner to hopefully be able to negotiate this thing. I don't think they're in a position to negotiate an end right now because the Kiev regime, the MI6-led Kiev regime, for two reasons. Number one, can't let it in because the ATM is still open and they're stealing money. And the European criminals are so involved in stealing money, they don't want the ATM to close down. And because the Kiev regime does not in any way, shape, or form run Ukraine, and even if they sign a deal that says we accept it, if Zelensky signs it, if all the Europeans, Macron, Starmer, all of them say we've come to an agreement with that, we're all going to sign it, everybody in the Zelensky government signs it, the Nazis in Ukraine are going to say, no, we're not going to do it anyway. And it will be revealed that Zelensky doesn't run a government anyway. So if he says, I've decided to take the deal, he can't return to Kiev because the Nazis will take him out and they're going to say, no, we're not going to do it. So what good does it do for me to sign a contract if I can't execute the terms of the contract? That's it. He can sign it, but he can't execute the terms of it because the Nazis will say, well, in that case, we're going to hang you. They've already told him they're going to hang him or shoot him long before this. So they can't really do this deal because there's no deal to be had because Trump does kind of represent the United States. The Putin government, the Russian government represents the government. They can say yes or no, and then the Russian government and the military will adhere to their orders. But Zelensky doesn't represent the Ukrainian Nazis, and they ain't going to listen to him, and they can't allow that to come out, and it comes out if he signs a deal. So they got to stop this. And what happens now? Now we're seeing desperation. It's a dangerous time. So what should happen now, if this was, whatever you call it, a democracy, a constitutional republic, if this was a country where there was rule of law, what would happen now is Tulsi Gabbard would announce an investigation. She said, we got to do an investigation. We got to find out who tapped his phones. And that person must be, whoever did must be charged. An investigation must, be done. We got to find out who was tapping the phones. And that person that group of people has to be criminally charged and held accountable. The problem is the people that will be doing the investigation are the people that are doing the phone tapping and the leaking. So what we have is a reality coming to the surface, and that is that the United States government, the U.S. empire, is in a civil war, is in an uncivil war, is in an uncivil conflict. Now, the thing that we have to consider, based on a couple of things, Charlie Kirk, what happened when Charlie Kirk ran afoul of the powers that be? What happened? I ain't going to say what happened, but I think you know what happened. A trans lone wolf activist shooter, quick change artist with a gun stuck down his pants, going up and down the side of a building, wandering aimlessly through some neighborhood half a mile away from the scene a half hour before the filthy deed took place. A story that no sane person could accept went down, and Charlie Kirk, who was pushing back against the system, met an untimely demise. These people are terrible. JFK, this is a Bay of Pigs moment, isn't it? JFK said, hey, I ain't going along with this. I disagree with things. Oh, by the way, I got some issues with Ben Gurion, issues with Israel. I got issues with the deep state, and I'm going in a different direction. And they said, well, you're not really going in a different direction. It's some guy who is perhaps a Zionist mafia guy named Jack Rubenstein, another CIA puppet, and all of the dark forces, the mafia, the dark forces somehow came together to do a dark and dirty deed on JFK. And so right now, if I'm Trump, if I'm what's his name, if I'm the Vice President Vance, I'm looking over my shoulders. I'm peeping around corners, looking over my shoulders, right? I'm very paranoid because these people are serious and they've gotten to the point where they're just going to violate the law. Now, from my perspective, I'll say this. Where we are is we're on the edge of, okay, we can't, a deal can't be done right now, but it can't happen simply, as I said, because there's no agency. There's no one who represents Ukraine that could convince the radical elements in Ukraine, the Nazi elements of Ukraine, to lay down their weapons and accept any deal. How in the hell are you going to have a deal that says the Nazi ideology is not allowed in Ukraine when MI6 has built up the Azov battalion bigger than ever? They have deliberately, see, one of the things that happened as a preemptive move is the Azov and the radical fascist element in Ukraine has been strengthened more than ever. Deliberately, they strengthened them, they built them up to hell, they armed them, and so now they're bigger and stronger than ever. And I'm sure they held them back in Kiev, etc., so that when we inevitably got to this moment that the regime is in deep and serious trouble, that the people of Ukraine want a deal, that the people of the United States want a deal, that the people of Europe want a deal, but the British Crown, MI6, the CIA, and these political elites don't want a deal. When everything was against them, they would have one last trump card to play. They would have one last ace up their sleeve. And the last ace up their sleeve is that they have armed and empowered the radical elements in Ukraine, so that when you finally get to the point, even if you squeeze Zelensky to the point where you grab his hand and you force him to do an auto pin or something like a Joe Biden, right? You force him to auto pin and you get the deal done with everybody. You can't execute the deal because the fascist radical elements in Ukraine say no. And you have strengthened them enough that they can suppress any more reasonable elements in Ukraine. Good luck finding them. But you have strengthened them to the point militarily. You have armed them to the point that they can suppress any elements in Ukraine that would say, okay. As I've said many times, ultimately what you're going to see is an internal conflict in Ukraine. And that was the preparations that MI6 has been doing. MI6, they strengthened and empowered and heavily armed the most radical elements because it would be minority rule. They are not a majority, right? But they're the most violent and the most heavily armed. So you don't have to have the most people. You just got to have the craziest people with the most guns. So now, as Ukraine is about ready to break, their plan, of course, of the MI6s of the world, the British Crowns of the world, the neocons of the world, is just drag this thing over. They don't care. They know Ukraine's going to lose. Their plan is, after Ukraine lose, we keep this thing going. We turn it into some kind of remember, their plan was, we're going to make it in Afghanistan. We're going to make it a Vietnam for Russia, and we're going to keep it going. And we're going to, remember, there was articles, the CIA is in there training elements so that after the war, they can continue terrorist acts against the Russians. They don't care that Ukraine is being torn to shreds. The people will be mangled. There'll be a refugee crisis. That's the plan. The plan is to drag this out so that after the Ukraine loses, you can fight to the last Ukrainian. Remember, that's the plan, to the last Ukrainian. As long as there's Ukrainians alive, what the hell? Their lives are expendable. That's what they're there for. So as they right now, because people are like, well, what are they going to do? Ukraine's going to lose. They planned for Ukraine to lose from the very beginning. And their plan is to, after Ukraine loses the formal war, to continue an informal war, a dirty war on Russia. That's what MI6 wants to do: destabilize the area, continue to destabilize Russia, destabilize the region, turn it into a conflict zone. And the Brits will continue, they'll continue to sell weapons and make money. And it's now we've got a conflict zone. They love conflict zones. All you got to do is look at the Middle East. They turn it into a conflict zone. They sell weapons. They make money. What do they care? So the Trump team is trying to screw it up because the Trump team wants stability there for whatever reasons. They may want to do dirty deeds in the Middle East with Iran or Venezuela or China. That's another conversation. I don't trust them. They're always up to no good. The U.S. empire is always up to no good. But when it comes to Ukraine, they don't want to run into a gigantic catastrophic defeat that's open to everybody, that everybody can see this catastrophic defeat, and that's the way it's headed. So you have a different plan One group says, the Trump Vance group says, let's head off a catastrophic defeat and we'll get some kind of a deal here and we'll move on to bigger and better, devious and diabolical deeds elsewhere. The other says, we don't care about a catastrophic defeat. Who cares? Our plan is for the long term to continue a dirty war with Russia, to have internal disruptions, to have a civil war in Ukraine and force Russia to deal with it, right? To weaken Russia any way they can over the long term. A disrupted, unstable, broken state on Russia's border, from their perspective, weakens Russia. And what do they care if there's refugee crisis in Western Europe? All the better for them. They love the destabilization that will allow an unstable political environment, and the people of Europe won't easily be able to rise up and say, we don't want these lunatics in charge anymore. And guess what else? An unstable conflict zone gives them an excuse. So when the people of, say, Germany or France say, hey, we don't like Macron and Merits, we want to vote in somebody new, they can say, well, due to all of these Ukrainians running around with weapons, we have to declare martial law. We can't have a regular election, so we'll just have to leave Merits and Starmer and Macron in for a while until we can settle things down. So they want destabilization so that they can maintain power. They want destabilization in Ukraine, so hopefully they can weaken Russia. That's their plan. They ain't trying to stop this thing with some kind of a deal. And not only that, think about this. If, as in this deal, at some point, Ukraine gets so weak and you make the deal, if, as in this deal, there's some kind of deal that gives this bargain where there's a non-aggression pact signed, and Russia says, well, we signed a non-aggression pact, and the U.S. says, we'll sign it, and the Europeans are supposed to sign a non-aggression pact. It's hard for them to now argue that the Russians are out to get them and want to attack them and come across the border when Russia says we're signing a non-aggression pact, and the only people that won't sign a non-aggression pact is you. So you can't have that non-aggression pact ever be put on paper and then someone asks you to sign it. Everything doesn't work for these people, which I get back to this, which says there are no links that they won't go to avoid things that they don't want to happen, including utilizing violence against persons who they see as pushing back against this. So now if you're the Trump team, think about this. You now have to say to yourself, which you should have already said it, but you now have to say to yourself, everything I do is tapped. Everything I've done and said has been tapped, is being used against me. You got to look and say, these people are out to get me, and they're out to stop this, and they won't stop at anything to do it. Now, you are naive, to say the least, if you didn't foresee this, right? If I'm the Trump people, anybody, and I'm trying to do this, every discussion I have, I say, well, like me, I talk to friends on the phone. I do it now. I talk to friends on the phone and I say, everything I got is tapped. And I've said this to people. I said, look, if a U.S. government ever came to me and said, Garland, we think you're a Russian spy. We think you're a Chinese spy. We think you're an Iranian spy and a Venezuelan spy at that. You're a spy. I would say to them, come on, guys. Every email I send, every text I send, every step I take, you've been watching me. So I'd say, you know good and damn well that you've tapped and looked at everything I got. You know I'm not a spy. What do you really want? That's what I'd say to them. And I'd also say, look, if you want to cook up a lie that says I'm anything, if you want to cook up a lie that says I'm a Martian spy, I know and you know you can do it. If you're going to cook up a lie that I'm a spy, just do it. Let's not play this game where you act like you really believe I'm a spy. Everything I got is tapped. You know I'm not. Let's not even play this game where you're like, Garland, admit it, you're a spy. There's no point in that. You know I'm not. If you're going to do your dirty deeds, do it. We both know I'm not. But if you made up something, cooked up something, did whatever you did, do it. Do what you got to do. There's no way around it. But let's not pretend, either one of us, that you actually believe I'm a spy. Just do what you're going to do. You got a plan here. Go for it. I've always said that's what I'd say if they came to me. Mr. Nixon, we got the goods on you. I'd say, well, I guess you do. You had to make them up. But there's nothing I can do to stop that. I know Scott Ritter. I know John Kiriakou. I know Julian Assange. I'm not knowing, but I've seen all. I know how you do. If you want somebody, you mix up something and you come get them. If you're going to do that, do it. But don't pretend like it's real. We all know it's not. That's always would be my position, right? My assumption is, so I just live my life. I'd say this: if you tap everybody, you tap nothing. If you tap into everything I got, good, because now you know you can't pretend anymore. If you tap everything I got, you can't pretend, right? But I make that assumption, and I'm just joking. As I said, I'm Schmucky the Clown. I'm not some friggin' big name guy. They know I didn't really have any say or authority here. I just go out and run my stinking yap, and if people want to listen, they can. They can't. They can, and if they don't have to. But the Trump team should have, from the. I mean, let me add this. Based on what happened from the very beginning, if they're tapping everything you say at Mar-a-Lago, before you even get elected at Trump Towers, you certainly know that they're tapping everything you got now. So I would imagine, I would hope that that Trump had a talk with Witkoff. Witkoff, they tapped everything I had. And they tapped everything you got. They're backgrounding, they're researching, they're following everybody they're tapping everything you have and everyone who's dear to you, and even people that aren't dear to you, it's all tapped. That should be the assumption right off the bat. It would be if I was the president. But the question is not whether it's tapped, it's will they play it. Now, what does that tell us, too? The fact that they're playing the game. It tells us that they're desperate. I mean, they're desperate, right? They're deep in serious trouble. They're afraid right now. There's real talks happening. And here's the problem they have. And this is the big problem, I think, and that's the people, the American people, because they live off the narrative. And the narrative is Ukraine might win. If we just give them a few more dollars, they'll win. If we just help them, give them another tomahawk, they'll win, right? How now that the Trump team is saying the jig is up, Ukraine, you're going to lose. How do you manipulate the people into believing that they should keep giving money, right? How do you say two things? Number one, the investigations that have shown massive corruption and theft, right? So now how do you say to the European people, yes, we need to give them another $200 billion, and they're having difficulty stealing it from the Russians, which means you got to steal it from the people directly. How do you say to the European people, now that it's been revealed, and I think this was from some people in the Trump team, I think this was the plan, and a pretty good plan at that. Number one, you reveal, as they say, financial revelations, as this guy says, and it's very, very righteous. Financial revelation seems to be a good channel, right? When you come out and you demonstrate that these people in Kiev are stealing money, it does two things. Number one, it puts pressure on the people in Kiev, but it's something that's far bigger. You now have exposed to the masses the narrative that these people are just some angels fighting against the evil Russians. It's false, that they're really criminals stealing everything, right? So now it is very, very difficult. Hey, couple that with the part of the plan being to give the Russians back their money, at least some of their money, to something to happen. That part of the plan say the Russians are willing to do something with that money. They're willing to talk about that money. Maybe some of it can go here, some of it can go there. The Russians are willing to discuss it. They're willing to discuss the money. I don't think the money is as big to the Russians as other things. They'd like to get their money back, but if they can get security, they'll take security. If the Russians could lose all the money but get all the security they want the security first and foremost. So that's not the biggest issue to the Russians. That ain't a drop dead deal to the Russians. It ain't the money. Right. But the Europeans want the Russian money. And the discussion of the money in the 19 point plan, whatever it is, makes it near impossible now for them to get their mitts on that money and to sell bonds based on them. Who the hell's going to buy one of those bonds? You're buying a bond that says once the Russians lose the war, you'll get your money back from them. Get out of here. Bonds are worthless. But they're extra worthless now because nobody's even going to buy one of them. You can't even do it because Euroclear is going to be like, hey, this ain't going to work. Everybody's going to. So you put the fritz on getting your Russian money. But now what do you have to do? You have to say to the people of Europe, all right, we're going to take the money that you normally use for healthcare and college and heating and things like that. We're going to give it to these thieves. And the European people are going to say, but it's already been demonstrated that they're thieves. It makes it hard to do this. It makes it hard right now in the U.S. How does the Congress now say, how does the U.S. Congress now say, we've put together a bill for another $60 billion to go to Ukraine after all of this has been revealed? They can't do it. So one of the strategic, tactical, let's go with tactical because it's part of a bigger strategy. One of the, I think, a brilliant tactical aspect of revealing the corruption is that it makes it near impossible for the leaders now to justify for their people that their people have to suffer, that their people have to struggle, that large amounts of money has to go to Kiev, because immediately the people are going to say, but they're stealing everything that ain't nailed down, and then they're going back and stealing the nails. So how do you justify that? Damn sure not U.S. Congress. That's over. How do you do that in Europe where they're broke? They don't have the money. They got no more money for Kiev. They got nothing. They don't have money for themselves. So the releasing that, so the bottom line is releasing that information puts the pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia, neocon lunatics on their back foot. And now there's negotiations, very dangerous negotiations that could potentially, I'm not saying it will, that could show a path. See, the problem is they don't want negotiations. You look at it and you say, look, these negotiations aren't there. But as a person who's done sales, I can tell you, if I'm trying to sell you something, even if it's expensive, as long as we're talking, I got a chance, right? As long as, if you say, all right, Garland, come on. And I say, well, Mr. So-and-so, we've got these cameras we can put all over your whatchamacallit. Yeah, too expensive. But let's add this. You've got a nice little system here for swipe cards for people to be able to get in your businesses, right? Yeah. How would you like to know when everybody goes, when everything you want right here at your computer, and you can turn on cars on and off, and the guy says, just too expensive. Get out of here, Mr. Nixon. I'm not talking to you, and I leave. Well, you think I'm going to give up? A couple of days later, I'm going to call him. Hey, Mr. So-and-so. Yeah, we stopped by the other day, and I stopped by. You hadn't made a decision. No, the guy told me no, he's going to get out. You hadn't made a decision, but maybe we can talk. I got a few more things that I may be able to offer that you're interested in. And the guy says, well, the answer is no, but you can stop by. I still got a chance to make a sale. As long as that guy says, because when there's no chance to make a sale, the guy's going to say, Mr. Nixon, it's over. I'm not doing that. I just decided not to make this, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm still going to call him in a month. Hey, Mr. So-and-so, yeah. Hey, Garland, you remember me? Look, guess what? We have some new features we'd like to offer that I think would be just perfect for you. Why don't I stop by? No, boom, he hangs up, right? But if he says, yeah, we had some thefts. It was employee theft. That's a big problem, And I say, I used to teach this so-and-so when I was in law enforcement. I always used that background to do sales for security stuff. I'd say, and employee theft is the number one problem of businesses. But we have some great solutions for employee theft. Why don't I stop by? Yeah, some employee theft. Yeah. What does that say? That says that in the interim between when I talked to this guy last time and he said no, and I called, they had some employee theft. And I come and said, doggone it, we found out that an employee stole $100,000 worth of stuff. Oh my God, it would be a whole lot cheaper. I told you, I could put this system in for $20,000. If you'd have done that, you wouldn't have lost that 100. There's another 100 waiting to be stolen. Let's talk. And the guy says, well, let me see what you got. I got a chance. What I'm saying is this. In sales, as long as I'm still able to talk to the prospect, there's a possibility for a deal, right? As long as we're talking about a deal, it's open. So even though right now you look at this 20 whatever point plan and say, yeah, the Russians are going to say no. But Trump and Witkoff, as guys who do business, know what I know as a guy who did sales. As long as you're talking, there is a chance. It may be a minute chance down the road. Why? Because circumstances will change, and they may motivate the prospect to say, well, I wasn't going to do it, but we had employee theft. Maybe I can look at that now. Something changed. He had made his decision. My point. You're talking to Ukrainians, you're talking to the Russians, blah, blah, blah. Something changes. Zelensky slips and falls on a banana peel and he's dead. The whole Donbass falls. Ukraine is surrounded by the Russian Spetsnaz. Circumstances on the ground change. And then the Ukrainians may call and say, you know, perhaps in hindsight, we were a little hasty walking away from the deal. Maybe let's talk now. You see what I'm saying? And the powers that be know, as long as they can say we can thwart this or whatever. But here's the truth of it. As a salesperson, I'll tell you this. As long as the Trump people are talking to the Ukraine people, are talking to the Russian people, as long as they are still negotiating, there is a possibility, even if it's remote, a possibility that a final deal could be reached. That's all it is. The odds are probably infinitesimally small, but the possibility exists. And the people who are against this don't want that possibility to happen. They don't even want a remote possibility because of how bad it is for them. They get exposed, everything's exposed. So they got to stop this. But my opinion is this ain't a very good way. But now let me say this before I go. They don't have much, right? This is the truth. They don't have much. And they really expose themselves. They didn't want to come out. Believe you me, they did not want to come out and say, all right, we're tapping Trump's phones. And okay, this is a crime, but we're going to release the info. You think they wanted to do that? And they don't even have much. What does that tell you? It tells you they're dangerously desperate. They are desperate. They're like, okay, we got to stop this. What do we have? How can we stop this? Guys, look around. Well, we got some. How about you in the back? Joe. Yes. Well, yeah. I tell you what. I can go through everything we got, all of the phone calls that we tapped. Let's look. We can go through the transcripts and get back to you in 2 days and see if we can find something in there. Get it done. We got nothing here, right? This is at the CIA headquarters. Comes back in 2 days. Old Joe, whoever his name is, comes up and says, well, there was a Witkoff phone call a while back. And Witkoff did say to the Russians, yeah, you know, tell Trump this, it'll help you out. I mean, it ain't much, but I think we could interpret it to say that Witkoff is working with the Russians. What do you think? We've been kind of going with that. Witkoff is working with the Russians, trope anyway. So we could do that. Maybe we can at least get Witkoff out of the way. We can paint him as working with the Russians. Maybe we can get back to Russiagate. Maybe we can say Trump is working with the Russians. Let's not forget, it was reported by the Russians. See, here's something you have to take into context. The Russians recently reported that MI6, that the Brits were going to try to resolve Russiagate. Let me see if I can find that. I forgot about this. This is huge. This is huge. This is important. Very, very important. There we go. Watch this. I want everybody. I forgot about this. I know I was going to end it, but you got to look at this. This is the context. This is where we are. Look at this. The Russians reported this. Britain is preparing a smear campaign aimed at damaging U.S. President Donald Trump's Now, think about this. I think, my dear and fluffy friends, we have discovered the smoking gun. Okay, this was a week or so ago. Britain is preparing a smear campaign aimed at damaging U.S. President Donald Trump's reputation in order to derail his efforts to end the Ukraine conflict, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service claimed on Tuesday. According to the agency, London views continuation of hostilities as vital to securing multi-billion-dollar weapons contracts. Ain't that what I said? That could help revive the struggling British economy, right? Plans have been concocted to revive former British intelligence officer Christopher Steele's fake dossier accusing the head of the White House and his family of having links to Soviet and Russian intelligence services. Okay, so a week ago or so ago, think about this. A week or so ago, the Russian intelligence said, "Hey, thinking Brits are up to no good again. Them sons of bitches. What they're going to do is they're going to now you got to get somebody else says I love how the Russians always have the always have the intel, right? It's kind of funny. The Russians were all over this crap. They saw it a mile away. Isn't it hilarious? So the Russians say, hey, the stinking Brits are up to no good. They're about to try the good old Russiagate claim again. And they're going to say the Trump team's working with Russia. They're Russian bots. The Russians are coming, blah, blah, blah. And then Witkoff advised Russia on how to pitch Ukraine to plan to Trump. What do you know? The Russians 1 week say, "Hey, the Brits are up to it again. They're going to try. They're going to try to do Russiagate." And what happens? Some intelligence agency, we don't really know who, releases it has been tapping the Trump team's stuff. And what do you know? They revive Russiagate. Trump's working with Russia again. Witkoff's working with Russia. Witkoff is Trump's ace boy, his sidekick, his guy that he trusts the most. And what do they say? He's working with Russia. Now, the next obvious thing to say is this, and might I add, that Trump knew about it and didn't even do anything. He found out and he did nothing, which means that Trump's working with Russia. Hey, it's almost like they're trying to revive Russiagate again. Who said that? A week ago. The Russians said it. The Russians said, let's see. Let me try another Russian outlet. Let's find another one. Let's find another one. Why do I have this fear they're gonna smoke this video off of YouTube? Let's hope not. This is smoking guns here. We got smoke, ladies and germs. We have found the smoking gun. UK may subvert Trump's peacemaking efforts, Russian intel warns. Britain could attempt to undermine U.S. President Trump's peacemaking stance by discrediting him with allegations of ties to Soviet and Russian intel services. This includes attempts to derail Trump's efforts toward resolving the conflict through Ukraine through a campaign of discreditation. Plans have been drawn up to revive the fake dossier prepared by Christopher Steele, accusing the U.S. president and his family members of connections. So the Russian intelligence was all over it. They said, isn't that something? Isn't that amazing? The Russians were all over it, and they said, guess what's coming, bruh? And that was, what's the date? Yesterday. Updated yesterday. That was updated yesterday. The other one was November 25th. But this has been, I read this several days ago. So it just didn't come out yesterday. They got it yesterday, but it didn't come out yesterday. But isn't it interesting? It's yesterday. Hey, they're going to play the game again. They're about to do this. And then this morning, hey, guess what? Russiagate is back. I think the Russians might have been onto something. Perhaps. Smoking gun right there. Smoking gun. Russian intelligence knew what was going on. Well, here's what's interesting. It's funny because it's like this. MI6 in the U.S. are tapping the phones. Yeah, there was probably more intel people on the line than there was U.S. people. It's like, okay, Witkoff is talking to Ushakov. The MI6 and CIA, they're on listening to everything. The Russians are listening to MI6 and the CIA, listen to everything. Everybody's, hey, okay, we got this stuff. So the MI6 and CIA get off and they're like, okay, guys, we got the goods. The Russians are like, okay, guys, we got the goods on MI6, and it's a rush. Who can get it out first? And the Russians are like, quick, get it out. Leak it to the press. Let everybody know what they're getting ready to do. So the Russians get ahead of it. Boom, they're getting ready to revive Russiagate. And then, of course, MI6 and CIA are like, crap. These sons, they're too fast. Should we release it? The Russians are ahead of it. Crap on it. Release it anyway, right? There were so many people on spies on that line. I guarantee the Chinese were on there. The North Koreans were on there. The French were on there. The Germans were on there. The Canadians were on there. There was this thing was the line of so many people. Everybody was on there but the Americans and the Russians, it seems like. But the bottom line is, so we've got the smoking gun, and there you see it. They were ahead of this. So what we see now, I would expect more Russiagate. It starts with Witkoff was trying to get Trump to, let's see, I bet you, let me do some searching here. We're going to do this together because this is important. Let's look if Russiagate has woken up again. See, here's the thing about it, and you notice it's in the BBC. So this is a Russia part of a Russiagate smear. Okay, this is BBC right here. There you got it, right? So I'll read it. BBC says U.S. President Donald Trump has defended Special Envoy Witkoff as doing the standard thing after a leaked recording appeared to show him advising a Russian official on how to appeal to the president. So that's the standard thing. That's what Trump said, and it really is. Witkoff has visited Moscow several times. We'll meet with Russia, blah, blah, blah. And look, Witkoff and we'll meet with Putin again this week. Now listen to the next one. He's never gone to Kiev in his role as special advisor, although other U.S. officials have visited. Dan Driscoll has visited. Trump says he will hold further. So it's, hey, Witkoff's gone multiple times gone to meet with the Russians, but he's never gone to meet with the Ukrainians. Should we be suspicious that he's a Russian spy? Let's see. In the leaked audio recording obtained and shared as a transcript by Bloomberg. So it's a leaked audio recording. So now we know the recording was obtained, right? Listen to this. BBC News has not independently verified the reported October 14 call, but Trump said it represents a very standard form of negotiations. It's over then, realistically. The two men talked about ending the war. Ushakov asking if it would be useful to get their bosses to speak. Witkoff is quoted as saying, "My guy's ready to do it," suggesting about how to go about the call. And then it says what followed was a 2.5-hour phone call between. So apparently, oh, I see. If you remember the call that Putin had with Trump, Putin and Trump had a while back, this was apparently before that. It was before that call. Okay. By the time Zelensky entered the White House, the atmosphere appeared to have changed. Trump said giving Kiev tomahawks could escalate the conflict, and he believed Putin wants to end the war. Asked about the call being leaked, Yuri Ushakov told Russian state media it was done to hinder, probably, and that it was unlikely to be done to improve relations. It was not clear who was behind the leak. Oh, yeah, the hell it wasn't. But Bloomberg has also transcribed another. Listen to this. It was not clear who was behind the leak, but Bloomberg has also transcribed another reported call between Ushakov and Putin envoy Kirill Dmitriev. According to this transcript, Dmitriev tells his Russian colleague, "We'll just make this paper from our position and I'll informally pass it along, making it clear that it's all informal and let them do like their own." So apparently he says, let's do this paper. Let's do our side, a paper we want to do it right from our position. This was Dmitriev says. I'll give it to them. I'll make it clear that it's informal and they can come up with their own. Oh, what a crazy thing to do. That the Russians say, we're going to write up a proposal that works for us. This is our proposal. And we'll give it to you informally. You write up a proposal that works for you. Give it to us informally, and we'll play with that. Oh, what an unthinkable thing to do. Apparently angered by the report, Dmitriev complained of a well-funded, listen to this, I'll talk about an admission. Dmitriev complained of a well-funded, well-organized, malicious media machine built to spread fake narratives, smear opponents, and keep people confused. Okay, well, there we go. I think Dmitriev might be on to something. So that's what we have now. That's where we are. We are at a place where the powers that be are afraid that their devious and diabolical plot will be screwed over. To be quite frank, if it wasn't for the Charlie Kirk thing and some other things, I think these entities would seriously have already taken violent action to prevent this. I'm just going to put it like this. I think they know if they take violent action to prevent this, that the whole jig is up, that whole thing falls apart, that it completely destabilizes the US. And I think MI6 knows they can't destabilize the US. I think they're looking at what's happened with Israel and they're saying, man, Israel's kind of losing favor amongst the people. Going to be hard to hold on to. I think MI6, though they're up to no good, knows that if they Charlie Kirk Trump, that's it. Take into account something else. Candace Owens has been reporting that Macron, and let's not forget French intelligence, that Macron and his team are up to no good, that they're looking at taking violent action against her. She's leaked that, very wise on her part. Apparently Pavel Durov, the guy that owns Telegram, a guy who was in fact nabbed by French intelligence, who was dragged in there, who said that they attempted to try to get influence Telegram and through threats and other things, other miscreant behavior, that they had attempted to force Telegram to take actions that would have interfered in like the Romanian election and elections in Eastern Europe, that they attempted to utilize Telegram for election interference that he wasn't down for. He has said that based on his contacts and knowledge and things of that nature, based on the information that he has, that he agrees with Candace, that he thinks that so what we've got people like Candace and Tucker who have to look over their shoulders. We have certainly the Zionist Israel connection. More and more people are starting to tie those connections to the JFK thing. People are starting to question whether or not some political assassinations could be tied to U.S. I'll put it like this: could be tied to U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East and purported allies that might have been unhappy. So we've got the combination of the Middle East connection, of the Five Eyes, because look, if France is involved in potentially planning violence against Americans, then it ain't just France, it's Five Eyes. We do know, let me add this, that a while back, Donald Trump did in fact Candace Owens reported that, I'm just going to say she reported, I don't know if it's true or not, but Candace Owens reported a while back that, what was I going to say? I lost track. But at any rate, bottom line is this. We know that, Candace Owens reported that Donald Trump called her. I don't know if this is what she reported. And apparently he had been talking to it was her understanding that he had been talking to the Macrons, and somehow the Macrons had asked her to back off with the whole thing that she was doing on, questioning Brigitte's gender, sexuality, whatever you want to call it. Not even gender, sex. Not gender, sex, whether she's a male or female. That's what she was questioning. And apparently she reported that Trump called her and said, cut it out. We do know that the Macrons have some kind of a lawsuit against her, that, she's persona non grata, shall we say, in France. And now she's reporting that they're up to no good, which would mean it's a Five Eyes deal against her, if that's true. So we're in a very, very tight spot. And all I can say is, based on what's happening, it appears that the gloves have come off. Number one, that the intelligence agencies are taking the chances. And Bloomberg, think about it. What we know now is Bloomberg is just, I wonder why they chose Bloomberg. Well, we know who Bloomberg is, but you have to ask yourself, they chose Bloomberg to drop it, to let it through, which means Bloomberg must feel, for whatever reason, that they cannot be held accountable. This is a violation. This is espionage, right? And somebody is literally saying, Bloomberg, here's the info. Bloomberg, here's the audio. Bloomberg, here's the text. Bloomberg could be held accountable. I don't think that's First Amendment protected. I think the U.S. government could go after Bloomberg and force them to give the info up of what they got. Furthermore, I think that Think about this. I think the intelligence agencies, if they were of a mind to, if it weren't for the fact that they're in on it, the intelligence agencies could go into Bloomberg's computers and all that kind of stuff. They could do what they needed to do to find out where this came from. They could get the files. They could find out where this stuff came from. So for some reason, Bloomberg feels that they can't be held accountable, probably because they can't be held accountable because the intelligence agencies which would do the investigations are part of the Corrupt Act. So at any rate, there we go, guys and girls. This is it. This is the beginning of something. Just keep in mind, from this particular show, we found that this happened a month ago. This happened in October. This was prior to the Trump-Putin phone call, and that's what this was about. That phone call that was made and it's over. Trump doesn't have a problem with it. The Russians predicted a day or a couple days prior that MI6 was about to revive Russiagate. This is clearly Russiagate. It's implying that that the Trump team is working with the Russians to develop U.S. foreign policy. That the Russians, think about it, the Russians have input on U.S. foreign policy, and that the Trump team is working with the Russians to do. So it's clearly Russiagate, and it was predicted things could get violent. So we'll see. Let me look and see, do we have any super chats? We do. I'm going to go through the super chats, and I'm going to answer the questions as best I can. Let's get going. Thank you, Garland, for your great work. Truck driver in Alaska is listening. Thank you, truck driver in Alaska. Super sticker from Yvonne Bomford. Thank you, Yvonne, for the super sticker. Thank you, Paul Choose. We got any more questions, whatever? This is a big deal. I don't see. I thought there was more. I'm sure. Oh, let's go here. Thanks, Ejos. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. Thanks for everything. Thank you very much. Let's keep going. Garland is the man. Thank you. Chindico? Dicko? I don't know. Dicho, maybe. How about we go with that? I think that's it. Let me look. How about we look at Rumble? All right. Do we have any? Nope, no Rumble rants. And we will look at Rockfin and see if anybody over at Rockfin has anything to say. And if they do, we'll answer them too. We will answer any questions that need to be answered. All right. New. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Oh, everybody's over there saying stuff there. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. And thanks, everybody. That's it. A couple of things. The only thing I would do is this. I'll end by thanking everybody at Patreon, if you can afford it. Patreon, PayPal, buy me a coffee is always easy. You just put buymeacoffee.com/Garland NH, whatever. And you can do buy me a coffee one time. It's like $5 or as many as you want. And you can do it monthly, just like Patreon if you want. Cash App. And there's my P.O. box. For anybody who wants to email, if you want, mail, snail mail. If you want to mail, you can do a contribution snail mail. I thank you for the people that do. You can do contribution. People send me books. People send me actually magazines. They still print magazines. People just write a card, a note, whatever they want. I certainly appreciate anything that I get from people, even if it's just a letter. If you can't afford a donation, that's fine. Just say hi. I really enjoy that stuff, and it lets me know that somebody cares. If you take the time out to write a letter that says, hey, Garland, whatever, I'm going to take the time out to read it, and I really appreciate that, and it shows me that there are people listening who care and who are excited about this important work. The most important thing you can do, and this work is important, I'm telling you right now, I think it's important. I'll say this. When you see Garland Nixon, Larry Johnson, the judge, Scott Ritter, Nima, all the people that are doing this stuff, understand something. All of us are professionals. The truth of the matter is this. Here's the truth. You don't make much doing this. Trust me, you just can barely scrape along. That's why I'm trying to raise money right now, because I want to go back to Moscow and Belarus and do things like that. And if I can raise money to do that, hopefully I'm putting money aside that people do. So hopefully I'll be able to go back to Moscow. But you don't make a fortune doing this. And trust me when I tell you this. All of the people who are doing these things are professionals, are very knowledgeable professionals who have significant backgrounds. And all of us could make a hell of a lot more money if we decided to go out into the world and do other things. Particularly if we want to be in the mainstream media, which I left the mainstream media, right? So the truth is, all of us, not me and me, look at, these guys, Scott and these guys that are doing this stuff, man. You're talking brilliant professionals. A lot of people here are very, very, you listen to the discussions that people have and you're like, these people could make a whole hell of a lot of money, all of us doing other things. But we don't do other things because none of us are in it for the money. The weirdest thing is when somebody says, Garland, I think you're doing this for the money. And I'm like, dude, if I wanted the money, I can make a whole hell of a lot of money if I just wanted to go out making money. Believe it or not, I was the number 8 salesman in the nation for the company that I worked in. If I wanted to go back to sales, I could make a lot of money selling stuff. Right? I could make a lot of money doing mainstream media. I was in. There's a lot of things I could do, make it a whole hell of a lot of money. I don't do it because I ain't in it for the money. I just scrape along a few pennies enough to make it with this thing. And so does Larry Johnson. And so does Scott Ritter. And so does the judge. And all of these people who are professionals. We just do what we can do because this is critical to us. And so that's why it's important, whether it's me or any of those other guys I named, any of them, super chats, whatever, any way that you can help any of the people that's out there doing this work, always take the opportunity to do it, or just send them something that says thanks. So we know that we're not wasting our lives for nothing. Have a good day. The most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. I'm out.